Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Lina Sarder Khil was running around the small playground at her apartment complex on a winter afternoon in San Antonio. Her mother, who was pregnant at the time, was also tending to Lina's younger brother. She watched Lina play for a little while, feeling proud of her little girl, a child who had already endured more than most. See, the family were refugees from Afghanistan, and just 1 month earlier they had been in Kabul when a suicide bomber attacked the area where they were located at, near the airport. While they were not physically injured, the emotional scars were inevitable. Now they were back in the United States, a place they believed that they would finally be safe. It was December 2021, and Lina was just a couple of months away from her 4th birthday. A new sibling was on the way, and Lina was excited to become a big sister once again. On the afternoon of December 20th, 2021, with a chill in the South Texas air, Lina's mother took her to the apartment complex playground, which was actually just a few steps from their front door. Lina played for a while, sometimes with other children and sometimes on her own. At one point, her mother stepped back inside the apartment building to retrieve something. The playground, as I mentioned, was only steps away from their apartment door, and other families were nearby, so she felt comfortable leaving Lina there for just a minute or two. But when she returned, Lina was gone. Her mother searched the playground, calling out her daughter's name, and soon neighbors and other residents were joining in on the search. But despite their efforts, there was no sign of Lina anywhere. Authorities were notified and an Amber Alert was issued that evening. But to this day, few answers have emerged in the sudden disappearance of this little girl. Where is Lina Sardar Khil? Lina Sardar Khil was born on February 20th, 2018 to parents Riaz and Zarmina in their home country of Afghanistan. Riaz was part of the armed forces there originally, but later, in fear for his own safety and his family's, they came to the United States as refugees under the guidance of the U.S. military. Lina was just a year old when the family moved to the States, settling into South Texas, in particular the San Antonio area. Riaz believed his wife and young daughter were safe now, and soon they welcomed a baby boy. Riaz got a job as a truck driver, and they made their home at an apartment complex that also housed some other Afghan refugees. This would make the family feel much more comfortable. They spoke very broken or very little English, and they had others around them who understood what they were going through. Little Lina quickly started growing into a beautiful, happy little girl who was always smiling. She loved being a big sister, and she enjoyed being silly and laughing. She could almost find the joy in anything. In August of 2021, Zarmina took her 2 children and traveled to Afghanistan. She wanted to visit her own mother, who was sick at the time. Now, that month also brought an exceptionally high level of danger to Afghanistan, as the U.S. military had decided to withdraw, and thousands of people were trying to flee the country. On August 26, 2021, while Zarmina and the kids were near the Kabul airport gate trying to leave, a suicide bomber detonated an explosive bomb that would kill at least 182 people, including 13 U.S. service members and many Afghan civilians. Lina was reportedly knocked unconscious by the blast, but ultimately was reported to be uninjured beyond that, as was her mom and brother. Her family was soon able to be evacuated back to the United States. During the next couple of months, Zarmina and Riaz had Lina attend some counseling sessions as they wanted to minimize the trauma that she may have felt from that experience. Even though she was just 3 years old, it was certainly quite a traumatic experience. Now, I can't even imagine how traumatizing that had to be for the entire family. Zarmina, as the mother and the protector, worried about her family, especially her young children, and Riaz, who himself had remained in the United States so he could continue to work. That had to be torture for him, knowing that his family was over there and so close to that bombing. Once back in the United States, the family tried to settle back into a routine. Zarmina was now pregnant with baby number 3, and things did seem to be settling back down. At least they had hoped so. The disappearance. On the afternoon of December 20th, 2021, Zarmina decided to let her children play on the playground for a bit. The playground at their apartment complex was in the center of the buildings, and it was just steps away from their front door. Now, the playground itself was small. There are photos of it online. It's actually very small, and it looks to have a 4-foot chain link fence surrounding it with an open gate. It was a cool, brisk day, and Lina had put on her long black coat over her red dress to go outside and play. There were other children and families there as well, and in particular other Afghanistan refugee families, leaving Zarmina feeling comforted by their presence around her children. After a short while, Zarmina decided to run back into her apartment real quick. Knowing she'd be gone only a minute or two, she was super close to the playground, and there were other families there as well. She left Lina playing with the other kids. But when she returned, she couldn't find Lina. She glanced around the entire area. She asked a few people and figured that Lina must have left with another Afghan family from the complex. Others jumped in and started helping in the search for Lina. They started knocking on doors, hoping that Lina was inside someone's apartment. And this is truly what Zarmina felt had happened at first. But when every family they checked in with confirmed that they also did not have Lina and they did not know where she was, Zarmina became more and more frantic. There were no signs of her daughter anywhere around the apartment buildings. She was only 3 years old. Where could she have gone? And everyone's panic grew, knowing that those apartments were located off a very busy, heavily trafficked road. Zarmina was reluctant to call the authorities at first. In her native country of Afghanistan, the authorities are often not trusted, and she had a hard time believing that she could trust the local police here in the United States. It was a friend and neighbor who had been helping Zarmina search who convinced her she had to call law enforcement. Reluctantly, but desperately, Zarmina made that phone call. Lina had last been seen in the late afternoon, sometime between 4:30 and 5 o'clock p.m. The authorities were notified around 7 p.m. And right after Zarmina made that call to the local police, she had to make that devastating call to her husband Riaz to fill him in on what was going on. Lina Sardar Khil had disappeared. The search and investigation. Carmina and Riaz spoke very little English, so it was extremely difficult for the authorities to gather information at first. This language barrier would prove to be a difficulty throughout the investigation as well. But despite these challenges, it does seem that the search for Lina was intense and immediate. Officers began searching the areas around the apartment complex, truly hoping they would probably find little 3-year-old Lina hiding in the bushes or behind a tree, or she had found some obscure hiding spot. Of course, they did not find her. They also started interviewing anyone who was at the playground that afternoon, but no one was able to provide any clues that were helpful. No one saw anything unusual, and no one was really paying attention to Lina. Law enforcement immediately brought out specially trained tracker dogs, but they were also unable to track Lina's scent beyond the playground. It really seemed that this little girl had vanished into thin air. Shortly after she had been reported missing, authorities decided to put out an Amber Alert within the state of Texas. That Amber Alert was said to have gone out around 7:30 p.m. Now, the apartment complex where the family lived, the Villa Del Cabo, had just under 300 units, and soon police were going door to door and talking to everyone. They even performed searches of the inside of each apartment there at the complex. And some apartments they searched more than once, although I cannot say why or what prompted them to do a secondary search on any of the units. They did learn that one of the units actually right across from the playground, did happen to have some surveillance camera footage that picked up an area of the playground. Now, this footage would not be released to the public right away, but in this video, which can now be seen online, you can definitely see Lina at the playground. It's not exceptionally clear, but you can make out this little girl in a black coat, slowly wandering outside of the fenced area, kind of trailing her hand along the chain link fencing and just casually looking around. She is moving slowly. It doesn't seem that she has any clear intention or direction. In fact, she looks kind of bored. And then she looks off to one side and slowly walks out of camera view. She is alone in this entire footage, and this is the exact time her mom had left her alone for a minute. Did Lina see someone and walk towards them, or was she just aimlessly wandering around bored, waiting for her mom to return? Sadly, as Lina walks out of this surveillance footage, this would be the last sighting of Lina. And there was no one else seen on the video, and she doesn't appear to be in any kind of hurry. This last confirmed sighting of Lina took place at 4:49 p.m. on December 20th, 2021. This apartment complex is located on the northwest side of the city, and interestingly, it has 2 gated entrances, although both of those entrances were always left open. Not sure what the point of a gated entry is then, but yet that's how it was known to be at that time. The Texas Department of Public Safety discontinued the Amber Alert on January 7th, 2022, a few weeks after it was first issued following her disappearance on December 20th. Officials did say the cancellation was procedural and not because the case was closed or solved in any way. Later in January, search and rescue dive teams were brought in to search any nearby waterways for the little girl. The thought was that maybe she had wandered off on her own, unseen, and had an accident falling into the water. But again, nothing was found. In September of 2022, a resident of that apartment complex was arrested after he was discovered with inappropriate material involving children. Unfortunately, you probably know what I'm talking about here, and he soon became a person of interest in Lina's case. However, he was soon cleared as to having anything to do with Lina's disappearance. Hopefully, he did have to answer to his other crimes, however. And I do want to mention, it does seem that within a couple miles radius of that apartment complex, at the time of Lina's disappearance, there were dozens of registered sex offenders in that area. It was mentioned that many of them were looked into, but there were no other details released regarding that part of the investigation. Now, as time went on and there were still 0 clues as to Lina's whereabouts, her parents began to take the brunt of the blame. Carmina and Riaz would actually end up having to move out of that apartment complex because they were being harassed so badly by those who believed that they had something to do with Lina's disappearance. Riaz also volunteered to take a lie detector test, asking authorities to please give him a lie detector test and help him clear his name so everyone can focus on Lina. In April of 2023, almost a year and a half after Lina vanished, the FBI administered a lie detector test to Riaz. However, those results were never released publicly. There have been few clues to go on in Lina's disappearance over the last couple of years. There is still a reward for information on her case put up by the Islamic Center of San Antonio and San Antonio Crime Stoppers. That reward is now up to $280,000. San Antonio, Texas. The city of San Antonio sits in the south central region of Texas. San Antonio is actually the second largest city in the state, right behind Houston. San Antonio has become home to thousands of refugees from Afghanistan. Tens of thousands came to the city in 2021 after the United States had withdrawn from the country. These refugees are processed and given visas generally through the United States military bases, which is why San Antonio saw such a surge during this time. Lina and her family came before the big surge in 2021. They actually came in 2019, and they were also assisted by the U.S. military. San Antonio is known as Military City because it is home to Joint Base San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston, Lackland Air Force Base, and Randolph Air Force Base. After coming to the States, Lina's father, Riaz, was able to find a job as a truck driver, and the family found a home at the Villa Del Cabo apartments. This is an older apartment complex with 2 gated entrances, as I had mentioned, although both gates were known to be left open at all times. The apartments have exterior doors, with most facing a common courtyard area, which is also the area where the small playground was located. And again, that playground was right outside the front door of Lina's family's apartment. Now, this complex in particular is located off of Fredericksburg Road, which is a very busy road. There are many other businesses in the area and several other apartment complexes around also. This is very close to Highway 10, providing easy access in and out of San Antonio. Could someone have driven in, taken Lina, and left the city? They would have had to grab Lina very quickly and without being seen or heard. They did have a window of time, maybe a couple of hours before the Amber Alert was issued within the state of Texas. Now, as far as I know, there was never any vehicle information provided. Many states actually require vehicle information to put out an Amber Alert, but not in Texas and not for Lina's case. So I can definitely see how a vehicle could travel out of the area without being seen. And authorities searched the area of that apartment complex first, even searching every apartment, which is quite a task to do since there's almost 300 separate units. They did expand the search outward, but again, there was just more businesses and apartment complexes to search. About a mile away is Leon Creek. This would be the closest known water source, but this creek has periods of time where it is almost completely dry. Certainly a little girl would have been found, especially by now, had she wandered to the water and had an accident. Now, this creek can also have periods of time where it is rushing water, usually after a large rainfall. Authorities did state that they did search Leon Creek and the surrounding area, but they didn't find anything to indicate that Lina had even been there. They also didn't feel that a 3-year-old could have wandered that far on her own through such busy areas, especially without being seen by someone else or picked up on any other surveillance cameras. There were also a few man-made retention ponds that were searched just in case, but again, none that were very close to the apartments, and authorities didn't really feel as if she could have wandered there on her own. And again, nothing was found at any of those ponds. Now, the area does have some culverts and drainage ditches, which searchers focused on right away in those early days, but again, found nothing indicating that Lina was there or had been there. There have been reports of other missing children in the San Antonio area, but they have been found generally very quickly. There are a few missing children cases who are listed as taken by non-custodial parents, quite a different situation than Lina's. San Antonio does present unique challenges for missing person cases due to a large population and easy access in and out of the city. But there's another reason investigating crime in San Antonio can be challenging, and that is the proximity to Mexico. One can drive from San Antonio to the Mexican border in about 2.5 hours. Lina's Amber Alert didn't go out until around 7:30 p.m. She was last seen around 4:49 p.m. on surveillance video at the playground. This leaves just enough time, barely, to drive from her home to the border and cross without raising any alarms. I do think that might be cutting it very close, but it's definitely possible, especially if the border agents hadn't seen the Amber Alert yet, or if Lina's appearance had been altered in any way by someone who took her. Similar missing children cases. Right off the bat, I was struck by how similar Lina's case was to some other cases I've covered here on the podcast even. Children who have gone missing from their apartment complex, playground, or a nearby playground. Melissa Brannon disappeared from Lorton, Virginia in 1989. She was only 5 years old. She disappeared from the Woodside Apartments during a Christmas party event in December of 1989. Her mother had stepped away briefly, and when she returned, Melissa was gone. Now, in her case, a handyman for the complex was later convicted of abducting her with intent to defile, though Melissa's body has never been found. The case is officially an unsolved homicide now, since there's no confirmed body or even definitive closure in her case. Also in 1989, there were 2 young boys at different times abducted from the same playground. The Martin Luther King Jr. Towers in Harlem, New York, was the site of the kidnapping of Christopher Dansby, who was a very, very young toddler. He was at the playground playing. His grandmother was watching him and was distracted briefly for just moments. And when she turned back, Christopher was gone. Extensive searches of the apartments and the areas surrounding those apartments turned up no clues, and Christopher Dansby remains missing to this day. Also in 1989, from that same playground, Shane Walker would go missing at just 19 months old. Shane was taken while playing with his mother near the playground at the Martin Luther King Jr. Apartments. His mother was sitting on a nearby bench when 2 older children approached her and asked if Shane could play with them. Shortly after that, a man sat near Rosa and began talking to her. Shane vanished in a very short span of time and has never been found. The theory is the children and possibly that man speaking to Rosa were distraction techniques for the abduction to take place. Shane Walker has never been found. Dulce Alves wasn't exactly at an apartment complex, but she was at a nearby playground in Bridgeton City Park. This would take place in Bridgeton, New Jersey. Dulce was at the park with her mother, Noema Alves Perez. She was also with her 3-year-old brother and an 8-year-old relative. Now, her mother and the 8-year-old were sitting in the family's vehicle about 30 yards away while Dulce and her brother played near the swings. After a few minutes, her brother returned to the car without Dulce and began crying. When her mother checked and started looking around for Dulce, Dulce was gone. Dulce Alves remains missing to this day. There is also some similarities in the case of Morgan Nick. Morgan was a 6-year-old girl who disappeared on June 9th, 1995, from Alma, Arkansas. She had been attending a Little League baseball game at a park with her mother when she was last seen near the parking area just after leaving the baseball field to go play with some other kids. Theories and possibilities. I don't want to narrow our focus on Lina's case too much, but I do want to briefly mention some theories in her disappearance. Theory number 1, a stranger abduction. Possibly the most widely believed theory in Lina's case. Someone drove into the complex and took Lina, leaving quickly and quietly. Someone who maybe saw a crime of opportunity. A 3-year-old girl walking around alone. Maybe they had even been watching her and noticed that her mom had gone back to their apartment for a few minutes. But again, they'd have to be quick and they'd have to take her without being noticed or heard by anyone else around. It was broad daylight and this was a busy apartment complex in a busy neighborhood. Another possibility with regards to a stranger abduction or a non-familial abduction is that this was someone who perhaps lived at the complex and was able to be discreet, knowing the ins and outs of the area. Maybe this was someone that Lina had even seen before and she went with this person willingly. Less than 1% of disappearances of children are at the hands of a stranger. The odds are totally against it, but it does happen. The cases of the other missing children I mentioned are proof that it does. And it's very possible that that is what happened here to Lina. Theory number 2, their refugee status. The U.S. Army took him under their wing, so to speak. It was the U.S. Army that helped bring the family to America to safety in 2019. Could someone have come to retaliate? Could her disappearance be related to their military connection? Theory number 3, Lina wandered off. Lina was just 3 years old, and toddlers and young children are known to be curious and wander off. Did she see something that she walked over to check out? Did she walk too far? Had she just become bored? Did she have an accident somewhere and somehow has remained hidden this entire time? Authorities don't believe this is what happened, but it is still a possibility. Theory number 4, the family. The family has been the subject of intense scrutiny from the public, but the authorities have stated they believe it's more likely that Lina was abducted by someone outside of the family. With what we know and what law enforcement has stated, this doesn't seem likely that something happened at the hands of a family member. But again, we just don't have any answers as to where she is, meaning nothing should be completely ruled out. So what do you think happened to Lina Sardar Khil? At the time of her disappearance on December 20th, 2021, Lina Sardar Khil was a 3-year-old girl full of energy and curiosity, just months away from her 4th birthday. She had dark brown hair and big brown eyes, and she was almost always seen smiling, which says a lot about the little girl, knowing how much she had already been through. That afternoon, she was playing at the apartment complex playground at Villa Del Cabo in San Antonio. Lina was wearing a black jacket with a hood, a red dress, and black shoes. If you have any information at all regarding the disappearance of Lina Sardar Khil, please contact the San Antonio Police Department's Missing Person Unit at 210-207-7273. This line is available 24/7 for any tips regarding missing children. You can also call Crime Stoppers or leave a tip with Crime Stoppers and remain completely anonymous. Their hotline is 210-224-STOP or 210-224-7867. You can also go online and submit tips completely anonymously at crimestoppersa.com. Thank you so much for listening to Lina's story today. Someone out there has to know where this little girl is. Someone has to know something. And her family has waited far too long for their little girl to be found. It's so important that we keep sharing her story. We keep talking about Lina, and we help get this little girl brought home. Lina's story was recommended to me from one of our listeners and Patreon members, Laura. Thank you so much for suggesting Lina's case. I had actually followed Lina's story a little bit from the beginning. She did have some media attention in that first year. However, we're a few years in now, and the media has definitely slowed down quite a bit. But I do feel we need to keep talking about Lina. We need to keep her name out there. Everyone needs to know this little girl, and everyone needs to know that she is still missing. I do want to give a thank you to some of the sources used in telling Lina's story today. KSAT 12, mysanantonio.com, KENS TV, CBS, and the Washington Post. Make sure you're following the Where Are They podcast on the socials for any updates on her story, and you can also see some additional information and photos. You can also head over to our website and follow our blog. We will have more info on other missing person cases, current cases, as well as past cases that we've covered. You can find all that information on our website at wherearetheypodcast.com. I do want to ask, if you haven't yet and would like to help our podcast reach more people, please leave us a 5-star review. This helps these cases be seen to more people. And honestly, even if people don't listen to this story, the missing person's name will still be boosted in Google searches, and every little bit of exposure helps. And a big thank you to those of you who have left reviews already. If you'd like to support us further, consider joining us over on Patreon for bonus episodes and ad-free episodes. Our Patreon page will be linked in the show notes, along with all of my contact information. I do want to thank Laura again for sending me Lina's story and for reminding me that her case is still unsolved and this little girl still needs to be brought home. Thank you again so much for listening to Lina's story today. A little 3-year-old girl who has vanished in the most mysterious ways, in broad daylight, in a populated area, and she is just gone. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons story. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.